Good evening, and welcome again to Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott, and tonight we'll be experiencing a little bit of living history. We all know how to read the history books, and we all know things that have gone before us, but tonight it's our pleasure to welcome someone who has lived through a lot of recent history and has some wonderful stories to tell. Our guests tonight are Ms. Pauline Fraser, an actress and in film, stage.
That's right.
And a dancer.
That's right.
And her biographer, Ms. Louise Brass.
Very nice to be here.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's go right into it. Now, before the show, we talked quite a bit, and Louise, you have actually written a book about Pauline.
Pauline's biography.
And
yes.
we'll get a close-up of this later, but this is called Presenting Pauline, right?
That's me.
That would be you, right? So, Pauline, you've had such an interesting history. You've met some world-famous people.
That's right.
You've been through some remarkable experiences.
Yes, yes.
So why don't we start with the beginning, as they do in the movies, right? We'll start at the beginning.
That's right.
You grew up in London, right?
Yes, I grew up in London, and from a very early age, I was associated with the theatre. My mother was a manageress of one of the London theatres, so I used to sneak in during a performance and watch the show, maybe the same show over and over again. But I love the theatre. And at an early age, I thought this is the life I would like to lead.
Well, it's very fortunate to be able to see it at such a young age, and then to be able to do it and really make it happen.
That's true.
Now, your mother supported you in that, didn't she?
Oh, yes. She was sort of determined, actually, that I would be in the theatre.
So let me segue just briefly, because Louise, you are Pauline's biographer.
Yes.
How did you come to meet each other, and what prompted you to write this story?
We're both members of the Daughters of the British Empire in the USA, which is sort of like the American, Daughters of the American Revolution sort of thing, but British. And
kind of the other side of that.
The other side.
Right.
And we were talking, and I would often hear about Pauline tell her experiences, and, you know, it's just so many interesting and fascinating things. For instance, she turned down a blind date and found out later it would have been Prince Philip, who's now the Queen's husband. That was before he was engaged with the Queen and everything. And,
so wait, I have to stop there. Why did you turn down a blind date with Prince Philip?
Well, this was, of course, when the Queen Elizabeth was very young, only in her early teens. But Prince Philip was a great friend of Hermione Gingold, who starred in the show. And when he was on leave, he'd come around the stage door and see if he could date any of the girls in the show. And the dresser came up to me one time and she said, there's two naval types at the stage door. Would any of the girls like to go out with them? And well, I already had a date that night, so a friend of mine in the show, she said, well, I'll go out to dinner with them. And the next night I said, did you have a nice time? And she said, yes, but what a show off. She said, the man with the, you know, the one that I was with said he was Prince Philip. And I said, oh, go on. So I said, go and ask Gingold. So she did. And she came back, she said, yes, Gingold said he was Prince Philip I went out with.
Well, so your friend had a date with the prince
with
and
Prince
didn't believe
Philip.
it the whole time it was happening.
Yeah.
Right? So your life has been filled with these remarkable episodes.
Yes.
In your book, I know it says that you were childhood friends with a young girl who grew up to be Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah, Margaret Thatcher. We were both born in Grantham, and her father had a grocery store at the end of North Parade, and my uncle had a business on Parade. And my aunt used to do business with Mrs. Roberts, you know, buy groceries.
Roberts was Margaret Thatcher's maiden name,
yes.
right? Yes.
And sometimes I go with her, and they'd be chatting, my aunt and Mrs. Roberts. And this little girl and I be sitting there chatting away. You know, of course, I was a bit older than she was. But, you know, we just would meet in the grocery store. And, of course, she went to the local high school and, of course, eventually became Margaret Thatcher.
Did you have any idea when you were little girls about where your futures would take you?
Not really, not at that time.
And some of the other remarkable people you've met, I know you, as a teenager, a young teenager, you moved to Hollywood with your mother.
That's right, yes.
And your classmate was a young woman who could sing pretty well.
That's right, yes. She was a little chubby, dark-haired girl. She was about 12. And we were in sewing class together. And neither of us could tell one end of a sewing machine from the other. So we giggle our way through the class. And she used to entertain in the, in the auditorium on Fridays. She'd sing a couple of songs and that. And then one Friday, the headmistress came on stage and she said, "I'm afraid little Judy will not be with us any longer. She's got a contract with MGM."
And she turned out to be...
And she turned Judy Garland.
Judy
Yeah,
Garland.
They changed her name from Gum to Garland. And
So let me switch for a moment. Louise, this
My
is
life story is not as exciting as Pauline's, I'm afraid.
but this is a fascinating set of stories.
Yes,
I'm trying to envision you sitting at one of the club events maybe and listening to this and thinking, wow.
As a writer, you know, how could you possibly not write this story of Pauline? You know, and we're really happy that we did get together. It took us 6 months to write it and go back and forth on all the different shows to make sure we got everything right, and that it correlated with the events happening in Europe, the World War II, you know, and the bombing of London, and where was Pauline when this happened and that happened. So it was quite a lot of work. But within a year, we had it published, and yes, we're happy with how it turned out.
So I'll come back to the book in a moment because I'm interested in how it's selling, how you promote it, and the other events that you do around the book as well. But the story itself is just so interesting. I can't help coming back to you, Pauline. So you came to the United States, you met Judy Garland, spent some time in the film industry in Hollywood.
In the radio also. It was a radio show that Pauline was asked to do because she had the British accent.
yes, they wanted...
And
they were
a
doing
remarkably convincing British accent. Yeah.
They were doing the life of David Windsor. This was when he was ready to abdicate and all that. And I was in England, and they wanted a little girl to play a part of Princess Mary. And it was going to be a series. It was, I think it was KFAC or something, station in Hollywood. And anyway, I auditioned, and they would like to use me if I could go to the States. So we did. We sailed for the States. I was about 12. And I went to the studio, and I played this part of Princess Mary. And the one that played the part of the Prince of Wales was a little Japanese girl with a strong British accent, if you can imagine it.
It's hard to picture.
Yeah, really, she was terrific.
So first of all, it's a girl playing a boy, and she's Japanese playing
Japanese
in
with
English.
this British accent.
It was perfect,
Really,
I imagine.
it was absolutely amazing.
Now, had the Japanese girl lived in England for some period?
She lived in the States, and
But she knew
yeah,
how to do the
that's right,
accent.
Yeah.
So don't believe what you hear on radio, right? You never know who it might be. So then you went back to London. And as I recall, the story was that your family said that, well, there's a war on, you need to come back home?
Yes. My mother felt, well, if anything happened, she wanted to be in her own country. So that's why we sailed back to England. And then I was a dancer, you know, and I was only about 17 when I went to the Windmill Theatre to audition. And I was taken on, I told them, I lied, I said I was 18.
Were you required to be 18 in order to dance?
That's right. Anyway, I was, you know, rehearsing for the first show that I was there. And there was all these tall girls that actually weren't dancing or doing anything, just wandering around the background. So anyway, come time for dress rehearsal, I'm all dressed up in my little dancing costume. And these girls were standing in the back of the stage with the sort of the long dressing gowns on. And then the producer said, all right, we're getting ready, we'll start the show. And they took off these dressing gowns, and all they had was a rose here and a couple of roses here, and not moving, stark naked, you know, just posing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they didn't dance.
They
just
didn't
stood.
dare dance. The Lord Chamberlain, who ran the theatres, said if you move, it's rude. So
Well,
therefore, they could be naked but stand like statues.
That was remarkably risque for that
Oh,
time period.
absolutely, yes. And we packed houses with men,
I'm sure.
including the clergy who came to see if it was the show was all right to be seen.
Did they have to come several times just
Oh
to
yes,
make sure?
they'd be there in the audience. Oh yes.
So you danced in the show, though, but you were a dancer.
Yes,
you
I
were-
was a dancer, so I just.
Now, ironically, you went back to London
Yes.
just before the war, or
Yes,
as the war was
that's
starting.
right.
But then you lived through the Blitz, the
Oh, yes,
siege of Britain for the entire duration of the war,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And I know we've got some photos here that I know are
Yes,
part
yes.
of presentations you do.
Yes,
Maybe you
that's,
can talk a little bit about what we see here.
Well, here is St. Paul's Cathedral, where a bomb went straight through the nave. That was the only bomb that hit St. Paul's. Here is a man who is getting ready to put out an incendiary bomb if it fell on his home.
He's getting
he
ready
has
with
the
the
buckets
hose,
of
right.
water and the hose, and he's trained how to put out these incendiary bombs.
Now, I want to come back to St. Paul's for a moment.
Yes.
Because I think many Americans don't know the significance of St. Paul's
Oh,
Cathedral.
yes.
But it's very famous, the architect, Christopher
Yeah,
Wren,
yes.
the architect, and it is a centerpiece of London. In
Yeah,
fact,
oh,
for
absolutely.
a long time, it was the
Yes.
tallest building. You couldn't build
Yeah,
anything
That's right.
larger than, or
No,
taller than.
no.
So the fact that it was hit by only one bomb
Bomb.
that did
yeah.
not explode
No.
is a
no.
remarkable story in
It
itself.
is a
right?
remarkable. I mean, it was bombed all around. I mean, it was in the city and all around these, all these office buildings and everything were all,
All
bombed.
destroyed.
Yeah, destroyed.
And so I know you talked about the picture here. I don't know if our camera will see it, but this is a picture of a man standing in his living room
Yes.
with what looks like an enormous bomb that's as
That's
big as
right.
he is, hanging from the ceiling apparently. And as you've described it, tell us
and
what this
it's
is.
unexploded bomb. We had hundreds of them all over London, bombs that actually did not explode. And even today, when they excavate for a building, once in a while they come across an unexploded bomb.
And so this fellow
You're
had,
just waiting for the bomb disposal to come and defuse it.
which could have happened.
Could have been 2 or 3 weeks because they were so busy, getting rid of these unexploded bombs. You had to wait your turn.
So I think of this because every now and then, something here
Yeah.
will happen, like there'll be a
That's right.
storm and you lose
Yeah.
the power and you think,
Yeah.
oh, what an inconvenience.
Yeah,
As opposed to this fellow
coming
who had a
home.
bomb in his living room for
Yes.
2 weeks, right? It's a little different.
And the attacks went on for, the whole, was it 4 or 5 years of the war? So, 1940 through 45
that's
almost,
true.
yes.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a couple of nights, it was constant. I don't know how they survived. But I think it's the sense of humor that Pauline always exhibits. That's what kept people going.
Well, I would think you'd have to, because it's so, there's so much destruction around you. that You
Yes.
have to keep your head somehow
Yes.
You become
attuned.
fatalistic. We used to say to each other, has your name on it? That's it. I mean, it was just a saying.
to say you
that,
can't avoid it.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
Now, there's an interesting story in your book about going to the wrong fallout shelter, or the wrong bomb shelter,
Yeah,
when
Richard,
you were
that's the first.
young.
Yeah.
The was it Café de Paris? Was that?
Yes, we were in the department store, Russell's department store. We went to the Café de Paris, the first raid, because that's what our little coupon said, this is where we were supposed to go. And this happened almost in the middle of the night. Air raid warden knocked on the door of this housing unit and said, everybody out right away, there's a raid, go down to your shelter. So we looked, oh, Café de Paris. So we all, in our dressing gowns and that, grabbed what we could and off we went. We go down and here's this beautiful nightclub, everybody dancing. And we come out the elevator, in pajamas, dressing gown. And
Curlers.
the manager almost fainted when he saw us. We showed him our passes. So he said, well, you go to a table at the back and I'll send you some coffee. And of course we sat there and I was so embarrassed, my hair was in curlers. Everybody's looking at us. Of course, right away it was changed and we would go to the basement of Russell's department store.
Which turned out to be very fortunate later.
Very fortunate because during the war, on the night of the Debutantes Ball, which is held once a year, Debs flooded to this nightclub and they had an aerial torpedo hit. The bomb went straight down, exploded when it hit rock bottom. Everybody, the band, were wiped out. All the dancers on the floor were killed, and the only people survived were those who were in the background.
And so that was one of the most devastating
Well,
single
it was
strikes.
absolutely
Right?
devastating.
So, and now it brings us back to your sense of fatalism, either because the cafe was several stories underground.
Yeah, it was
right?
underground. You had to take an elevator to go down.
Yeah. So the idea of it being hit seemed
Yeah.
remote. I'm sure.
That's right. They thought it was the safest place to go.
And yet it was destroyed. So
It
as you
was
say,
destroyed,
your name was on it or it wasn't.
yeah. I guess it wasn't.
Yeah, yours wasn't. Oh, the day you were there.
Oh, that time.
And so then during the war, you made some interesting acquaintances along
yes.
the way.
Yes, the last show I was in, starring Hermione Gingold, General Doolittle came to see the show, and he went backstage to meet her. He enjoyed the show so much. And I guess she was telling him how short we were on rations, you know. And he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll send a limousine on a Sunday when the theaters close. And if some of the members of the company, and there were only 9 of us in the company, would like to come to my home in High Wycombe, I will see that they get a very good lunch and also stay to tea. So of course we were all, you know, hungry for some real food. So we started going down there.
And this became a regular
It
event?
became a regular thing for about 4 or 5 months. And then, as I say, in one lunch, he said, I got a very important guest coming to lunch, and I want you all to be very nice to him. And come lunchtime, in walks General Patton.
George Patton
And,
himself.
yes, and I was surprised. He had a very ruddy complexion and jogpers and a riding crop.
Well, that's kind of
Kinda
the classic
strange
picture you
looking.
have of him.
But he was a very charming man. And that evening, we had a big fog coming on, and they had to get to London, both of them. So they took off. And then later, the chauffeurs came in and said, it's so foggy, we cannot get you back to London tonight. You'll have to sleep in the home here. So this aide came to this lady who was in the show with me, Olive, and said, would you mind sleeping in General Doolittle's bedroom? So we said, well, no, we don't mind. So we went upstairs, and there's this huge king-size bed, which we'd never seen king-size bed before, private bathroom. And then on his dresser, there's beautiful portraits of his wife and 2 sons. So we get into bed. On my side of the bed, there's a little panel coming out with telephones and switches. And we looked at it, and I thought, well, what on earth is that for? And Olive said, well, maybe he has to get in touch with Churchill in the middle of the night or something. So I said, what do we do if the phone rings? So I said, I can't say this is Pauline in General Doolittle's bedroom.
Well, you could have, but it would have made the headlines.
Yeah, but thank God it didn't rain.
Yeah.
We were all right. Next morning, the fog had lifted, and we all went back to London.
So this, your interest in or your connections with the military also led to another interesting offer, right? That you were
And
asked
that was
to,
the reason why she didn't go out with Prince Philip. She was dating somebody else that night. That turned out to be
Prince Philip, yes.
Oh, no, the fellow you dated that
it
night.
was your husband, I think. You were going out with your husband at that night instead of Prince Philip, right?
Yeah, I had a date with my future husband.
Well, that
So
turned out pretty well.
Prince Philip's at the stage door looking for a date, and Hermione Gingold asked one of the other girls to go, which she did. And she heard that he was Prince Philip, but she didn't believe them, you know. And then she went and asked Hermione Gingold when the show started the next evening, and she said, yes, it was Prince Philip we went out with.
Now, you also had some interesting activities with the intelligence services.
Oh, yeah.
Because you'd lived in the United States?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I was working the Cabaret nightclub, one of the girls' dancers. And one evening, Mr. Murray, who ran the club, asked me if I would go and sit with a gentleman, which was normally against the rules. We never mingled with the customers. And this gentleman, I sat with him, and he asked me a lot of questions about the United States. How well did I know it, et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, I'll be back again to talk to you. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, he came back, and he said, if you sat with someone and they were claiming to be an American, they weren't, you'd know it, wouldn't you? And I said, well, certainly. So he said, well, maybe you do a little work for us. And he said, when you mingle and someone starts something like that, let us know. Go to the local police station, tell them, and I will hear about it. So a couple of occasions it happened, and I let him know through the police station. And then one evening, this car came through Mr. Murray's club, and they asked me if I would go to this gentleman's home. He wanted to talk to me. And I still had my makeup on and that, you know, we'd just finished the floor show. Anyway, I went in this car, and we went to this beautiful sort of estate. I think it was in Kensington, with iron gates and that. Anyway, went up this driveway with this beautiful home, went in the house and sat in this library, and this gentleman came in, and he said, I'd like you to work for us, if you wouldn't mind. Just let the police know regularly if you see something. So I thought, oh, this is great, you know. But then I went home to tell my mother, and she said, absolutely not. She said, who do you think you are, Mata Hari? She said, you know what happened to her. So she said, that's it, no more. So I had to tell them sorry, but my mother wouldn't let me do it.
Now, you were still a teenager at the time, correct?
Oh, I was 18 or 19,
18,
I can't quite remember which.
But if mother said no, that was enough.
She said no, that was it.
And we all know, actually, as our viewers may not know, Mata Hari was famous in her time,
yes,
but now
dancer and a spy.
And a spy.
World War I, I think.
And was captured and shot, executed.
By the French, I believe.
That's right. So yes. So you avoided that fate as well.
Yes,
right?
you did.
God, I wasn't.
right. So Louise, let me come back to you for a moment. I wanted to come back to the book and the presentations. Now the two of you have gone out and taken this story out kind of on the road, right?
Definitely.
So what have you been doing in order to publicize this story?
Well, we appear in schools and colleges, Naperville and Wheaton and around. And we also do book signings. Next week I'm going to be at Dixon for a book signing, July 3rd, 1 o'clock, starting at 1 at Books on First. In Dixon during the Petunia Festival. In October, Pauline and I are going to be at the Little Traveller in Geneva for an English high tea, and Pauline's going to tell all her exciting adventures on October 12th. And we have some other things coming up too.
So I'm interested about the schools as well. When you go to the schools, and are these mostly grammar schools or high schools?
I went to junior high schools.
Yes.
Junior high schools.
I'd given them a talk.
So these are children who are 11 to 13, say.
Yes.
How do they react to the stories?
Very interested. Before we went, there'd be 2 or 3 of us, you know, that were in World War II, a pilot or a navigator or something like that. There would be newspapers in the school pertaining to World War II, books laying out so they'd get familiar with it before they actually had us there. And then we'd give maybe 2 sessions in the morning with different groups, and then 2 sessions in the afternoon. And then we would have lunch in the school. And this went on for about, as I say, 13 years. We were going back and forth. Jefferson Junior High School.
And so what kinds of questions do the children ask? I mean,
well,
because it seems so remote.
The bombing they were interested in, you know, were you scared, you know, with the bombing and that?
Of course, the answer was
yes. And then what did the children do? Because I was telling them most of the children in London, though it wasn't compulsory, were evacuated into the countryside. Before war was declared, people from the government went around to homes in the countryside, and they would say, how many bedrooms do you have? And if this woman said, I have 3 bedrooms, and you know, maybe 2 children, they say, well, this was compulsory. The children can double up. You have 1 bedroom to spare. We will pay for the room and board, but you will accommodate a child from London or from some other city. And these children from different homes in the cities all ended up going into the countryside. And then they would take over a castle for a whole school. And they would live, eat, and learn their lessons in a castle.
That must have been fascinating for the children at the time.
Well, that was the whole idea. You've got to save the children. You know, this is. So
then there are one of the photos you have here.
That is in those children. A lot of mothers wouldn't allow their children.
Wouldn't allow their children to be taken.
So
to the country.
the tube stations, they put bunk beds at the back, and their families, you know, claimed certain bunks, and they go down there every night and sleep
every
there.
night.
Every night,
because you never knew when the raids would come.
Mostly, they really were almost daylight, nighttime. You know, when it got really fierce, it was just, you know, constant.
So, how does that affect your view after the war was over? Having lived through that, how does it has to have changed you in some way. So what do you think was different about you after the war?
Well, you see, when the war ended, I got married in the June. The war was just over, and my husband came back to the States, and I sailed for this country in the following February. So I really wasn't in England very long after the war, before I came back here. But it was very rough. I mean, for 2 or 3 years, rationing was still on in England.
Even after the war?
Yeah, yes, because where we got extra rations, like Spam and powdered eggs from the States, that all went to Europe, because they were sort of starving over there.
Right.
So we were on very short rations, well, at least the English people were.
So then you came back to the United States.
Yes.
And you've been here ever since, right? So how did you meet your husband?
Well, he came to the stage door.
Another one of the American servicemen who's looking for a
and,
date?
he tried to convince me. I met him at one of the parties at one of the bases and that. And so finally I went out with him that evening, had dinner, and then we just dated, and eventually asked me if I would marry him and come back to the States. And we were married like 2 days before he left. He was suddenly told to leave, and then I came 7 months later.
So you met in England,
Yes,
a whirlwind romance,
yes,
and then he left.
yes.
But somehow it still worked out, right?
Somehow it worked out.
Yeah. And he was, did you say he was a
He was
pilot?
Mickey radar officer for the 392nd Bomber Group.
Okay.
He was putting the leads in the lead plane, had to put this bomb sight.
Oh, so he
And
was
for accurate bombing, yes.
he was in grave danger every time he flew.
Well, he didn't. He flew 1 or 2 missions if it wasn't working right.
Right.
But otherwise, he didn't.
He didn't fly as much. Okay. So looking back
Yes.
now on a truly remarkable life,
Yeah.
this question is really, how do you make sense of it, but what do you take from it? Do you feel that you've had a lucky life? Have you, do you feel you want to tell people about it and have them learn from you?
Well, it was exciting life. I mean, you can't say it was a dull life.
No.
But I'm glad I survived, to tell you the truth. I mean, I was just one of the lucky ones that survived the war.
Well, we're already out of time, believe it or not. So I can't think of a better way to end it up. So, Pauline Fraser, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and hearing some of your stories.
Thank you very much for having us.
And Louise Brass, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for writing this story.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us again on Public Perspective. I'm your host, Kevin McDermott. You can see us every Saturday night at 8 on Comcast Channel 19, and you can find us on the web at publicperspective.tv. So until next time, thank you and good night.